Hello and thanks for joining us in this week's programme. Why 10 years after campaigns like this, highlighting the perils of double glazing, the security it offers could still cause a flame-filled nightmare in your home. We find out how the great Pavarotti made a dream come true for two Watchdog viewers, and we meet the socket phone customers who want a socket to BT over yet more controversial charges. But first, 7 out of 10 adults have money stashed away in a building society, a little nest egg, and thanks to high interest rates, a nice little earner. Or is it? Tonight we reveal how tens of thousands of you are almost certainly not earning what you thought you were earning. Why? Because some building societies, and indeed some banks, may be keeping you in the dark about what's happening to your account. Only last week, the Building Society Ombudsman broke new ground by finding in favour of a nationwide customer who'd lost out because she hadn't been told about the falling interest rate on her account. Just one case in what some claim to be a multi-million-pound scam. The issue was drawn to our attention by Doris Broadhurst from Birmingham, who's 90 years old and a customer of the Trustee Savings Bank. Doris has a place in history. Back in 1930, she was the first customer to join the Birmingham Municipal Bank, as it was then known. That's now been swallowed up by the TSB, who also deserve a place in history for offering the stingiest rate of interest in the entire UK. Doris's account didn't contain a fortune, just £224. But do you know how much it earned her after 6 years lying untouched in the TSB account? Well, I'll tell you, just £32. Or, to put it another way, she was getting interest of 1% gross.
I knew it wasn't much, but I wanted it out. But I did expect a bit more than that I did get. And I thought I should have more interest, and I did say that, so that it would, well, I wanted it to help towards, shall I say, funeral expenses. And, of course, when you're getting on in years, you have to think of these things, don't you?
Mrs. Broadhurst is one of many in the same boat. MP Alex Carlisle, the trade and industry spokesman for the Liberal Democrats, reckons that banks and building societies are depriving their customers of £700 million a year in what he calls a racket, whereby they introduce new accounts and then cut the interest rates on the old ones without properly informing their customers. It's a staggering figure, but one that the Butterfields from Hemel Hempstead find easy to believe. 3 years ago, Beryl Butterfield popped into her local branch of the Woolwich Building Society and opened a guaranteed premium share account, at that stage offering a high competitive rate of interest. She thought it would stay the highest earning account. She was wrong. In 1990, the Woolwich introduced much more attractive ones. However, it wasn't until a year later that Beryl found out about them, and by that time, she'd lost £700 worth of interest. The Butterfields couldn't believe their ill luck.
I thought she'd made a mistake in her maths, because it seems such a large amount for such a short period of time. But I couldn't believe it. We actually sat down and worked it all out on pencil and paper that it was right.
I was very annoyed because this situation had happened to me with the same building society previously, and I'd asked at that time if I could be notified that should at any time I need to change the account. I go in on a monthly basis every month, and I feel the cashiers, they recognise that the obsolete accounts that come along, and they should really have said to me, you need to shift this account, or would you like to shift this account, but it's never been offered.
Banks and building societies are not legally obliged to tell customers about changes in their rates of interest, but critics of the present system, like Abbey National customer Rob Saunders, argue that they have a duty of care to their customers. Rob's had a 5-star account for 5 years. Last year, he discovered, quite by chance again, that the Abbey's new Instant Saver account was giving a higher rate of interest. Now, he was lucky. He switched accounts immediately, but he's still angry that he had to find out the hard way.
The first time I knew it was obsolete was from the list of interest rates. In fact, if you look at the interest rates, the top half, or the 2/3 of the list, is all the new ones, and at the bottom, in white, in very small print, is the old ones. I stand in the queue looking at other people, and I see their 5-star accounts, and I wish I had the guts to go to them and say, look, you know, very loudly, look at the interest rates, look at your book, and let's see. But there's certainly, I can see no desire, or probably any pushing of anybody to say, look at your account and see it. Because what they're only showing around is the new accounts, not showing the old accounts, fine, but they should be there. Every cashier, whenever they get a 5-star account across the desk, should be telling them, this is not the best account. Because I can't see any reason to stay in it.
So why don't banks and building societies tell their customers that the nest eggs that they think are doing well will be better off in newer accounts? Well, obviously, it's not in their interest to do so, but officially they say that it's just too expensive to let all their customers know individually. So they rely on newspaper ads or posters in their branches. But even assuming you had the time and the inclination to monitor all of the papers, all of the time, to make sure you weren't losing out, what good would it do you? There are rare exceptions, like this one from the Nationwide, but most ads only tell you about the new accounts. They don't tell you about the declining rates of the old ones. We asked the building societies for their reaction to our viewers' complaints. Doris Broadhurst, paid just £32 interest in 6 years, prompted this response from the TSB.
In a move unique to the top UK banks, we will be writing to customers in March to provide them with a comprehensive list of our savings accounts. This will enable our customers to check that they have the account which best suits their needs.
Good, and about time too. Let's hope it's clear about outdated accounts. So what about Mrs. Butterfield? What's the Woolwich got to offer her?
If the Woolwich had written to all investors at every change in its accounts last year, it would have cost some £5 to £6 million. Such extra expense would lead to lower rates for investors and higher rates for borrowers.
But no one's suggesting that they should write to all investors every time accounts change. What we and many of their customers would like them to do is write to just those whose rates of interest are no longer the best. As for Rob Sanders, the Abbey National told us,
in April, the investment mailing will include details of investment rates for all savings accounts.
Great, but will they tell us in a no-nonsense way about accounts that are no longer competitive? Well, let's hope so. One other important development. The Nationwide, criticised last week by the Ombudsman, is considering compensating up to 100 customers angry at the way they were kept in the dark about their interest rates. And they promise that from now on they'll write to all customers whose interest rates are no longer as attractive as they once were. Good. And by the way, if you think that complainants have only themselves to blame for not keeping tabs on their accounts, you better include Lynn and me in your condemnation. Because the other week, I discovered that our account with the Alliance and Leicester was no longer offering the 7 or 8% it once did. Instead, for the last year, we've been getting less than 4%. They've promised to investigate, and I look forward to their reply. In the meantime, if you feel you've been duped about interest rates by a bank or a building society, please drop us a line. Our address will be on your screen at the end of the programme. And please mark the envelope interest rates. Lynn.
Now, here's a question for you. What's the difference between these two phones? Answer, absolutely nothing, unless you rent your phone from British Telecom, in which case this one is infinitely more expensive than this one. Millions of people in this country rent not just their lines from BT, but their actual phones too. You might not realise you rent yours. If you do, you're paying £17.86 a year for the privilege of renting this. What you might not realise, if you nipped into a shop and bought the identical model, it would cost you only a few pounds more, £29.95. So if you're renting, in less than 2 years, you've shelled out the price of buying a phone. And that's not all. You can get perfectly good basic phones in any high street for under £10, and they come with a year's guarantee. So if you've been renting one of these from British Telecom for the last 10 years, say, as John and I have, here's how many phones you could have bought instead. 17 of the things. Now let me tell you something else. You can only buy a phone if you have a socket connection, like this one, where you can unplug the old phone, old BT phone, and put in your new one. But what if you still have an old hardwire connection like this? Take Jane and Sidney Levy, who live in Mill Hill, North London. BT gave the Levys no choice at all. They have to rent a phone from them. If they want to save money and buy their own, they'll first have to pay nearly £30 for an engineer to convert the wiring from this to a socket one. A BT engineer, by the way. By law, they aren't even allowed to do it themselves or use anyone cheaper. Not surprisingly, the Levys and millions of other hardwire customers, many of them pensioners, object to paying. Oftel, the organisation which regulates the phone industry, has had dozens of complaints about this, and it's now pressing BT to give hardwire customers a rent reduction. So what's BT's view on all this? Well, they've been keeping pretty quiet about the phone rental for captive customers, worth £107 million every year. Up to now, that is. When we asked them this week how they could justify charging such a high rent to customers like the Levys, who have no choice but to rent, BT conceded that these customers got a pretty poor deal. They told us they were fully sympathetic and they are actively discussing it with Oftel at this very moment. I can predict that in a few weeks' time there'll be a little announcement from BT that people with hardwire phones will get a large reduction in their rent. We'll keep you posted. And if you don't know whether you rent your phone or not, check your bill and do watch out.
This is the idyllic image of double glazing. Looks warm and comforting, doesn't it? It's what most people dream about when they install replacement windows. But have you thought about the risks? Lynn's discovered that, unlike this one, the design of some windows could be a death trap. Her report has CFAX subtitles on page 888 for reasons that will become very obvious.
Dense freezing fog has formed there and pushing up into the Vale of York and down into...
To keep the worst of the winter weather at bay, millions of homes in Britain now have replacement windows. Double glazing can keep in the heat, reduce fuel bills, and for some, give a greater sense of security. But what if there's a fire? All it might take, a carelessly discarded cigarette, and your investment in double glazing could be a terrible mistake.
More lines in and off, more wind in and off.
Victor Koss is deaf. 4 years ago, he was a happily married man with a young wife, Ellie, also deaf, and a lovely son, William. Then the family installed double glazing. Within weeks, Ellie and William were dead, killed in a fire which consumed their home. Victor will always be haunted by that terrible night. He discovered the fire late at night when he got home from working at the deaf centre.
I got out of the car, and when I went to open the front door, the handle was hot. I opened it, and the heat just pushed me away. All I could think of was my wife and son upstairs asleep.
Victor went next door to call the fire brigade, but it was too late. His mother, Mavis, remembers his despair.
Victor really was in such a shock that I don't think he knew where he was or what he was doing. It's all he could just think of was Ellie and William, and with his not being able to hear, he just got there screaming in his head all the time.
The Koss family lived in a house like that with similar windows. There was a top ventilation bit, but the main window didn't open. Had their window opened, Ellie and William would have been able to drop onto the bay and so get down into the street. Instead, they were trapped inside. It was an extremely severe fire. The firemen had to break the double-glazed bedroom window with an axe. When they did get in, Ellie was found overcome by smoke on top of the bed. Little William unconscious in his cot. It's thought that Ellie tried to break the double glazing, but couldn't.
I was angry about that. I never thought about it. If the window could have been opened, they'd still be alive.
William died in hospital the next day. He had inhaled too much smoke and his body was severely burned. Ellie lived for another month, but never regained consciousness.
I think it would be unimaginable, the fear, sheer fear and terror of not being able to even break the glass, not even a weak point in the glass that you could break, even to attract anybody. My thoughts that it would have been sheer terror for Ellie.
William and Ellie were trapped in the upstairs bedroom. The fire had started downstairs, cutting off any escape through the front door. The fire brigade were shocked that they'd died because they couldn't get out of the window.
That's the situation really that causes us the most horror, where people, they think, improve their house by putting in that sort of glazing, small openable louvers perhaps at the top to let in some fresh air. But what they've really done is created a situation which they have endangered their families in.
Once a fire starts, you have just 2 or 3 minutes to get out. Most people get out of their front door. It's the best and easiest means of escape. But if you can't get out that way because the fire had spread and the stairs are on fire, the window is your next best escape route. But if you've installed double glazing which won't open, you could find your family trapped. We know of several deaths over the last few years because people were unable to break sealed windows.
You might not believe that double glazing's difficult to break. I'm going to prove it, but first, the fire brigade has made me put on this lot because breaking windows can be a very dangerous thing to do. First, this is a single pane of glass. This is an ordinary chair. Look how easily that broke. Now, this is a double glazed replacement window, the sort you can't open. I'm going to try to break it. It didn't break. Now, if it doesn't break with a chair, here's something which it should break with, a metal hammer. It still didn't break with that. Now, the fire brigade tell me that the bottom right hand, bottom left hand's the best place to hit. I'm going to try it with this. Remember, I've only got 2 minutes to get out of the house. It still didn't break.
This is one of the few things which will break double glazed windows. A punch, but surely hardly any homes have one. Yet being able to break glass could be vital for someone, as it's the second most important way to get out.
We're moving away from a situation where people had a secondary means of escape, and we're cutting it off. And if somebody did that in, say, a public building, say a hotel for something, and said, we've cut off the secondary means of escape, then we would close it down as a fire service. So I think anybody who hasn't got a secondary means of escape available to them is in a very dangerous situation indeed.
Hundreds of people are saved from fire every year by climbing out of their windows. So I was absolutely staggered to discover that the law doesn't require us to fit windows which we can actually escape out of in most houses. As a result, many thousands of our homes could be potential death traps right now if a survey that we've just conducted is anything to go by.
Watchdog researchers went to dozens of Birmingham homes. We talked to 50 families with replacement windows which looked as if they didn't open. Over half had no opening upstairs at all. Most of those families hadn't thought about how they would get out if there was a fire, and nearly a third of them thought the double glazing would be easy to break.
They have only got this very limited time to get out of fire. So they are potential death traps. We do need to see a situation where we face up to the fact that within people's private houses these days the fire loading is high, and we do need to be able to provide the secondary means of escape through those windows.
The trade association of the glazing industry, the Glass and Glazing Federation, says companies should warn the public of the dangers as part of their code of practice. This recommends that its members
will always draw the attention of potential customers to the absence of means of escape, and will have available in their product range opening replacement windows which will provide the means of escape.
So, do sales reps give good warning? Watchdog put it to the test. We invited 7 salesmen from different companies who all said they were members of the Federation to quote on supplying sealed double-glazed units for upstairs bedrooms. We secretly filmed what happened next at a house in London. The first sales rep gave no warnings at all of a potential fire risk.
He will have completely...
The second brought a window with him and sold it on security and ventilation, but no warning of how impossible it would be as a means of escape. The third rep said absolutely nothing about any fire dangers. And number 4 didn't raise any objections to the idea of no proper openings at all.
Do you want no openers at all?
I don't really think so. I mean, as long as we've got, you know, a ventilation up there.
Yeah, that's it.
At last, full marks. Sales rep number 5 thought warnings were important.
We want as big a window as possible.
How did you get out of the fire? Because you'll never smash it.
No, really, they're hard to smash.
Because they're all on a cushion, you see.
Yeah.
So,
Well, maybe we ought to think about that.
really you should.
Number 6 was also frank about fire risks and the need for openings. Number 7 said nothing during his sales spiel, then as an afterthought said he'd check the fire regulations. Only 3 out of 7 sales reps stuck to the code of practice. We put our findings to the Glass and Glazing Federation.
We would like to thank Watchdog for bringing this to our attention, and we will remind all our members of the importance of warning customers about openable windows.
The chance of a fire happening in your home is rare, but if you're thinking of replacing your windows with double glazing, think about getting windows which open. These also lock with a key. Then, if the worst does happen, your family can escape.
Victor and his parents would love to turn back the clock and install safe windows. Sadly, that's not possible. All they want to do now is stop the same tragedy happening to someone else.
If it hadn't happened to us, you'd have thought it's just like ordinary windows. You don't realise how tough the glass is, and you get them done, and you think that you're all right.
But dancing up in other areas during the night to the south and west.
Our thanks to Victor and his parents for helping us make this programme. It was very brave of them. We've asked John Lee to sign for us because we'll have some important advice in a moment. Remember, fires are rare, yet just last week a family narrowly escaped with their life from this house in Birmingham. 2 little boys were trapped in this upstairs bedroom. The windows double glazed and they couldn't escape. The rest of the family got into this room, the only upstairs window which opens, and escaped out of this back window by climbing down the curtain you can see there on the ground. They were slightly injured, but they were unable to reach the boys. Thank goodness the fire brigade only took 2.5 minutes to arrive because they smashed in the front window with axes and rescued the boys, whose room was rapidly filling with thick smoke. Minutes later, the children would have been dead. The fire happened at tea time. If it had been the middle of the night, the family might all have died because they didn't have a smoke alarm. If you haven't got one of these, do buy one. They cost from around £4 to 20 or more for ones with a light. Unfortunately, deaf people can't use an ordinary smoke detector. This one here has been specially developed. This one here has been specially developed with the help of the Royal National Institute for the Deaf, but it and other alarms for the deaf cost around £80. Now they work, I'll just show you how, with this fake smoke. They work by strobe lighting and by vibrating pads that you carry around with you. That excellent for the deaf. Now, I've been absolutely appalled to discover how hard double glazing is to break. Apparently, it's the cushion of air here between the panes which stops it breaking. The best we can suggest to break it is this, a centre punch costing around £2.50 from stores like Halford's. But if you've any other ideas, we'd love to hear from you. In case a fire ever happens to you, plan how you and your family will get out of the house. You can get free advice from your local fire prevention officer, and next week we'll have more information on exactly what you need to do. One last point. Ellie and William Coss died in October 1987, the very month that new safety laws came in. They say companies which don't supply us with goods which are reasonably safe are breaking the law. Surely windows which you can't open in a fire aren't reasonably safe. Yet this is a tragic loophole in the law. Non-opening windows aren't covered. Incidentally, all 4 companies whose sales reps we secretly recorded, who didn't warn us about fire risks, say that customers would have been warned at a later stage. We do hope so. If you've had your house double glazed with upstairs windows which do not open and you weren't warned of the dangers in a fire, please write to us. Your experiences could help us get the law changed. And if you'd like a fact sheet with our advice on fire safety, please send us a stamped addressed envelope.
And now some good news involving this fella. Remember the story of the Pavarotti fans who booked trips to see the great man in concert in Europe, only to discover that the packages were either third-rate or never even got off the ground? Well, among them was one couple with a special reason for wanting to see and hear one of the world's greatest tenors.
For Hazel and Richard Macpherson from Aberdeen, the voice of the great Luciano Pavarotti is a constant joy. They vowed that one day they'd see him perform live, and for Hazel, time's running out.
It was important to me to get an experience like this before I go totally deaf, which will happen. You know, but it was important.
The Macphersons shelled out £1,200 to see Pavarotti in Seville last May. 8 days before they were due to leave, the travel agents, Concert Tours Limited of Cheltenham in Gloucestershire, said the concert had been cancelled. That was a lie. It went ahead, and to prove it, here's a picture of Pavarotti performing in Seville that very night. Proven as liars, Concert Tours Limited rubbed salt into sore wounds by refusing to refund the Macphersons the £1,200. The Macphersons had given up hope of seeing either Pavarotti or their money back when, and all credit to them, the News of the World newspaper stepped in. Having seen their plight on Watchdog, the paper flew the Macphersons to Dublin as VIP guests at an operatic concert to mark the end of Dublin's year as European City of Culture. A chauffeur-driven limo was laid on and champagne sent to them before being whisked to prime seats at the Point Theatre, where they saw, well, who else? The great man himself. Indeed, not only did the Macphersons see Pavarotti, they actually met him backstage. It was a dream come true. And back home in Aberdeen, more good news. Their credit card company refunded the money they'd shelled out for the trip that never was. As for concert tours, well, they're still advertising trips to big concerts, and according to your letters, these are just a few of them, they're still letting people down. They're also calling themselves Jonathan Makin's Musical Breaks and Opera Breaks, using the phone number and address of Concert Tours Director Nicholas Pritchard. Trading Standards officers have just completed an investigation into the activities of Concert Tours Limited, and a report is expected within the next few weeks. If you are an aggrieved customer, stay tuned. We'll let you know the verdict.
And finally, remember our campaign last year to get these fitted at the factory, moulded on plugs? At the moment, we're the only country in the Western world which allows our shops to sell goods in this state. Well, the Minister for Consumer Affairs has told us he's delighted with our campaign. Indeed, Watchdog's evidence is going to be discussed in the House of Commons on Wednesday. The Minister says he's going to change the law soon, making it illegal for shops and manufacturers to supply electrical goods without plugs already on them.
And that's it for this week. Don't forget, if you've got a problem, our address and phone number will be on your screen in just a moment. We can't reply to all your letters, but believe me, they do all get read. Until the same time next week, goodbye.
Goodbye.